Chair.
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Chair, well, I thank the member for his description or his reference to Otakaro in Christchurch. The reason he hasn't heard about it is because it's only recently come into existence. So that's understandable, but it is taking up the Crown's asset and liabilities that are extant from the activities of the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority, and putting in charge of it a board to essentially clean up and finish off eventually the role the Crown has played in Christchurch, after a discussion about what rightfully falls to the Council and what rightfully falls to the Crown. I just want to acknowledge the huge contribution of my colleague, the Honourable Jerry Brownlee, in getting to this stage, frankly. The Convention Centre is just one of any number of highly complex and challenging commercial and engineering problems that had to be solved in Christchurch, and he showed a remarkable ability to deal with most of them. And Mr Speaker, is that kind of pragmatism that is guiding the way the government spends a lot of the money referred to here in these estimates. Members may have heard this general use of the term social investment, and increasingly the government spending, particularly as overseen by Treasury, financed through or funded through vote finance in some parts, Treasury using these tools alongside with other government agencies. The combination of ubiquity of data and the relative cheapness of the technology that can make sense of it means that we are going to be able, and are now, developing a much more refined view of who the Crown spends its money on. More importantly, what actions, guiding decisions around what actions can be taken to change lives, to change the trajectory of those over time who, particularly the most disadvantaged, who are the most significant recipients of government-funded services. And we, through the appropriations of Parliament here, at relatively low cost, are building a toolkit which will enable both the public service and ministers to see much more clearly and directly both the costs of failure, that is what happens to people if we spend money and have no impact, or if we don't spend money where we should, but more importantly, the potential impact of doing a good job of it. And as time goes on, more and more government expenditure will be able to be looked at through the lens of some kind of quantification or prioritisation of investment. And the equation is pretty simple. I mean, the tools that are being financed here enable government to look at the investment proposition for whole populations, for parts of that so for instance, all sickness and invalids beneficiaries, now supported living payment and job seeker HCID beneficiaries, or segments of them, which is actually much more important. That is, you can have two people who are aged 34 on a benefit who have completely different prospects. One may have turned up last week, one may have already been there for 15 years. And understanding that difference would mean providing different service to each of those people, even though they're both 34-year-old Pākehā males living in Wellington. In the past, government was essentially flying blind. Government's been making assumptions, often reasonably well informed, treating people in broad categories rather than groups or individuals with their unique characteristics. It's certainly going to be a challenge for the public service as we develop these tools, because it involves a much more personally driven, personally focused way of making decisions and deriving solutions. So, Mr Speaker, as the committee traverses other votes, we'll find more and more that the tools being financed through these votes are contributing to getting better results for all the other spending.
Julian.